Every day, something dramatic happens in the Caribbean that affects our lives. We'll give you the details. We'll give you the facts on Caribbean Perspective with Eddie Frederick. Here's Eddie Frederick.
So glad you can join us. Amendments to the immigration bill in Trinidad and Tobago spark hot debate in the Senate. This story takes the lead in today's edition of Caribbean Perspective for Thursday, 17th March 2022. Details when we return.
Hubbard's Motor Department Mount Gay and Hubbard's Tire Bay, located at the Building Supplies Compound in Grand Anse, are reminding the motoring public that another round for licensing and inspection has begun. Just arrived on new shipments of quality furrowed and torque tires to fit all makes and models of vehicles at competitive pricing. Shop early to avoid the hassle of long lines. WhatsApp them on 473-405-5482. Hubbard's, quality service, affordable prices.
Welcome back. Amendments are being proposed to Trinidad and Tobago's immigration bill, which will allow skilled CARICOM nationals to work in the Republic, but it has sparked some debate in the Senate, with one UNC Senator, David Nackett, saying it will have economic implications for the already poor and unemployed Trini. Overshitawari Rupnarayan of TV6 News reports.
Food insecurity at a maximum, no access to proper grants, and having to turn to a life of crime where we all look at them and say, look, committing crime all over the place. But there are reasons behind that. And bills like this contribute to that, Madam President. So we have to ask ourselves why at this time, where admittedly, by the PNM themselves, by this group, they admit that we are in serious economic straits. How would this bill help our citizens? We have to ask ourselves, how would it help? How would it help? Would it provide better job possibilities, opportunities for the people that need those jobs?
The senator also calls the bill a political Trojan horse for the PNM.
I would like to remind the minister that it only takes 1 year for a resident here to have the chance to vote. And you've stated that it takes 5 years. I hope you will also address that when you contribute at the end.
Senate Vice President Nigel De Freitas did not take well to this assertion.
So what he's trying to make this population believe is that Party A has somehow gained enough influence to undermine, usurp, and overcome all of the political organizations in another country, to convince citizens of that country to pack up their Georgie Bungle, sell off their assets, take the children out of school, come to Trinidad and Tobago, be placed in a constituency so that they could vote for that party. And if that sounds crazy, you now understand why I say that Senator Mark is imaginative.
Meanwhile, independent Senator Varma Diyal Singh is advocating for safeguards to dispel any notion of persons entering under this amendment to acquire an easy entitlement to vote.
If those persons have this viewpoint, we have to see how could we, put something here to satisfy those people to say it wouldn't happen. And will it happen or will it not happen? Did it happen before? And Madam President, I'm not going to, Selwyn Ryan, there are other, the late Selwyn Ryan, there are other, intellects did express the views at one time Trinidad and Tobago use persons to come in here to vote. So I don't want to know if you to call it voter pardon or bringing in people, but it existed and is a fact.
Still on Trinidad, former Commissioner of Police Gary Griffith says he intends to be the next Member of Parliament for Diego Martin West, confirming his return in the near future to active politics. He addressed this while defending his tenure as Commissioner of Police during an interview on the morning edition of TV6. Aksha Gulson of TV6 News reports.
Are you going to re-enter the world of politics, and are you going to challenge Keith Rowley in Diego Martin West?
Well, again, Keith Rowley spent all his time trying to prevent me from getting the seat of Commissioner of Police. So while he'll put focus on that, I will be looking at Keith Rowley's seat. Keith Rowley has proven to be a total failure as a Prime Minister and a Member of Parliament. He has not visited his constituency in years. I intend to show Keith Rowley how to be a member of parliament, and I intend to show him how a prime minister is supposed to act.
Mr. Griffith says the Prime Minister's confession must not be taken lightly, and that is why he has chosen to write on the matter.
I have also written to the chairman of the Police Service Commission. I've written also to the director of the Police Complaint Authority, because all that is required is for the police to do their job. Mr. Jacob cannot appoint the person who handles the private security for Keith Rowley to ascertain if it warrants an investigation. The facts are there. We have a PSC chairman. We need to find out from the previous chairman, did someone influence, intimidate, harass you to change, to alter the merit list or to resend it? If she says yes, that person can be charged.
The former Commissioner of Police maintains that he was removed for simply doing his job, and that party politics also played a role.
All Keith Rowley needed to do if he did not want Gary Griffith was send it to Parliament and reject me. And that was it, because I did not put a clause in my contract for renewal. I was going to leave. He said he wanted me to remain until he got the whispers from his caucus, we have to get rid of Gary Griffith. So instead of just removing Gary Griffith in Parliament, you had to form this clandestine mafia thing to try to see if you could discredit Gary Griffith by appointing committees after committees, which is the playbook of the PNM.
On the operations of the TTPS, Mr. Griffith says transformation requires adequate time on a consistent basis, and he was not given the opportunity to continue the work he started.
Mr. Jacob is correct, because one of the best things with leadership is when you're gone, it continues. But trying to transform the police service in 3 years, it meant that as soon as I left, they went back to the same old, which is where you're seeing the results now. You're seeing the attitude, but that is just from a small percent in the hierarchy of the police service.
While the issuing of firearm users license under his leadership remains under scrutiny, Mr. Griffith says he has never manipulated the process in any way for personal gain or favor.
I issued 5,000 to 6,000 firearms in my 3 years. Not one was used to commit a crime. Not one was lost. Not one was stolen.
No, but that's not the question, Gary. That's not the question.
I'm coming to it. A billion. The point is, the answer is no, because a commissioner of police has no. This is not to get a firearm. You have to spend 3 months for it to be at the station. You have to read background check, and every single thing that is done comes from the FUL department. That is why when Stanley John talked his foolishness about a massive, well-oiled criminal industry, 7 months later, not one person has been arrested. Wake up and smell the Balize coffee.
Aksha Galston, TV6 News.
You're listening to Caribbean Perspective with Eddie Frederick. Guyana has lifted its COVID-19 restrictions, paving the way for the resumption of social activities. The president also removed vaccine rules for people entering public places, and wearing of masks no longer mandatory.
People are now able to freely participate in social activities and are not mandated to wear face masks, though this is still encouraged. And with vaccination rules largely gone, it is now only mandated that all operators and passengers of any land, water, or air transport present a negative PCR test or approved antigen test taken within 72 hours of arriving in Guyana, along with their proof of vaccination. Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs Anil Nandlal said the relaxation of these rules signals that Guyana is returning to a semblance of normalcy.
The new COVID measures, we should have the country opening back to, as far as possible, the position ante the COVID outbreak, and business should resume to normalcy. Restaurants, all public places, people can continue to gather. There are no longer restrictions on distancing, social distancing. There are no longer restrictions in terms of opening of business places, etc.
The Bahamas joins in financial sanctions against Russia and Belarus. More in this ZNS News report.
The Bahamas has joined the list of countries imposing financial sanctions on Russia and Belarus following Russia's invasion of Ukraine in late February. The sanctions come under CARICOM's treaty with the U.S. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs advising the public of recent orders that directs all financial institutions to review dealings with Russians, Belarusians, and Russian and the Belarusian entities on the prescribed schedule and report back to the Attorney General. The financial regulators have warned all financial institutions not to engage in dealings with those groups as they are subject to international sanctions. A directive from the Central Bank, the Securities Commission, the Insurance Commission, and the Gaming Board issued yesterday calls on regulated entities to apply the highest level of risk management controls to deter the potential for any misuse of the Bahamian financial system in the current global environment and indeed every circumstance.
Over in Jamaica, the PNP leadership and Peter Bunting adamant that he will not resign. TVJ tells us more.
Former National Security Minister Peter Bunting is defending himself in the wake of mounting calls for him to step away from the Senate. Last week, an Integrity Commission report revealed that Mr. Bunting and another former National Security Minister, Robert Montague, granted gun licenses to people with criminal traces after they were initially turned down by the Firearm Licensing Authority, FLA. Mr. Bunting was a guest on Radio Jamaica's Beyond the Headlines with Dion Jackson Miller a short while ago. Vashon Brown has the details.
Robert Montague resigned as a minister without portfolio in the wake of the Integrity Commission report, and since then there have been calls for Peter Bunting to also step aside.
Would it be correct to say this is not something you plan to do?
No, absolutely not.
Has the leader of the opposition asked?
Sorry?
Or has there been a conversation with the leader of the opposition?
He made his own statement or gave an interview to the media in which he addressed that.
In an interview with the Gleaner, opposition leader Mark Golding pushed back at critics who have called for Mr. Bunting's resignation from the Senate and as shadow spokesman on national security. In a statement last week, Mr. Bunting shed light on the 2 firearm application appeals which occurred while he was National Security Minister. He said one case involved a person who had been charged 10 years earlier with cocaine-related offenses while they were a student in Florida and whose record was subsequently expunged.
Isn't it true, though, that when you're dealing with certain very sensitive areas, very sensitive sectors, very sensitive organizations, they do not operate solely on the basis of charges, convictions, and documentation of that sort. Wider investigations that throw up red flags will also be taken into account. Isn't that true? Such as, for instance, a sector you're familiar with in the financial sector.
Yes, it depends on what the particular statute allows. But what I'm saying, in this case, these facts were considered by, an eminently qualified review board. As I said, a judge of the Court of Appeal, a judge of the Supreme Court, and a leading Queen's Counsel. These persons would be well seized of all the circumstances and facts and law related to the case.
Hubbard's Motor Department Mount Gay and Hubbard's Tire Bay, located at the Building Supplies compound in Grand Anse, are reminding the motoring public that another round for licensing and inspection has begun. Just arrived on new shipments of quality furrowed and torque tires to fit all makes and models of vehicles at competitive pricing. Shop early to avoid the hassle of long lines. WhatsApp them on 473-405-5482. Hubbard's, quality service, affordable prices.
I am Eddie Frederick. This has been Caribbean Perspective, a whole new approach to highlighting developments in the Caribbean. In the meantime, please continue to log on to CaribbeanPerspective.com for more daily news and more.